We are heading on safari. How's it, chaps? Been some time since I've last been in front of the camera. My name's Jason Crouch and I'm normally a part of the team that's behind the scenes of all our videos that we prepare here in the factory. As you can tell from the title of our video today, we've got a slightly different one. I'm going to be preparing my Barefoot Bronco African Rangers for an on-foot safari. For many of our long-time subscribers, you'll remember about 2 years ago when we released our Barefoot range, we headed to Hluhluwe-Imfolozi Game Reserve for an on-foot safari that cost us $160 to showcase what you can get here in South Africa. Now, over the next few days, I'm going to be heading back with the same boots on feet for round number 2. For a further dive into what this park has to offer, we're going to pop up some links of our last video and our last trip out there. We highly recommend going and checking it out. We had some great sightings on our last hike through Hluhluwe-Imfolozi Park. So the purpose of this video is to give you a better idea of how we prepare our boots for some serious miles out in the bush, and to give you an idea of what our Bronco material looks like once treated with a gym green leather balm. So my pair of African Rangers are relatively new. I've only been breaking them in for about the past 2 months, but you can already see the characteristics of our oily Bronco material starting to set in, with the oils moving around and starting to mold to my foot. So with the hike that I'm heading on, we're going to be going through a relatively flat terrain, so it was a bit of a no-brainer to head for the Barefoot African Ranger for the occasion. So without wasting any more time, let's get these boots cleaned up, waxed up, and ready for the hike ahead. So it's a new day in the factory here, and we've let these boots sit for the past 24 hours, letting our gym green leather balm sink into the leathers. As you can see, the boot has gone a few shades darker, but this is all in rejuvenating and bringing the oils up at the top of the leather. We'll put a nice little B-roll shot here so you can still see how the oils are moving around in this Bronco leather, even though it has gone a few shades darker. Another pointer to point out is that the water resistant properties of this boot have been improved by adding the beeswax, so this will come in handy for the early mornings out when there's a bit of dew on the grass in the bush. So that being said, this pair of African Rangers is ready for 3 intense days of hiking through the bush, and we'll catch you on the flip side once the hike is finished, just to see how this pair of boots performed. Alright, a few days have passed and now I'm back in the office from the hike. It was a great few days out in the bush, and we covered roughly 20 kilometers over the days hiking through the bush with no paths and some amazing sightings. As you can see in front of me, we've got the boots that we prepared for the hike, but before we jump into my review and how they performed on the hike, let's take a look at a few of the sightings that we came across while we were in the bush. After arriving at the park, as you can see, our whole team of 6 was kitted out in Barefoot Bronco African Rangers. We had to get a few formalities out of the way, and then we headed straight into the park. Not long after entering the park, we had our first sighting of about 30 elephants in a herd. They were quite far away, but was a great sighting nonetheless. After arriving at the camp and signing a few more forms before we headed out into the park, we were greeted by a familiar face from our last journey. There's Hluhluwe again. Let's see the soles of them.
had before.
Yeah, this one's been in our range for 30 years.
For 30 years, yes.
Yeah. Thank
Okay,
you for all you do and looking after the wilderness.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's very nice to see.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
A lot of kilometers. Many kilometers.
Day 1 after arriving, we headed out on a short trek through the bush of about 5 kilometers.
Sorry, I don't have the card, so you should swap me with Jason.
About halfway through our hike on day 1, we were greeted by a nice surprise as we went around the corner, a white male rhino. With our hearts racing from that last sighting, we continued forward, and a few meters later, we were greeted by 2 female white rhino. And just like that, day 2 had begun. We looked at doing about 15 kilometers throughout the day today. One of my favorite sections of the hike was definitely following through a dried up stream bed that we found in the park. It was a bit challenging, but this is where we saw some of our best sightings along the way. Although your eyes are peeled in the bush for predators such as lion and cheetah, you do have to keep a small eye peeled open for these little guys in the bush. We came seriously close to crossing through this golden orb spider's web while we were on the trail. We stumbled upon a small watering hole in the park and decided to put our feet up and have a bit of a breather. But little to our surprise, we heard a huge rustling in the distance and decided to crack on to find out what the noise was coming from. After tracking down the noise, we stumbled upon a huge male elephant wallowing in a bath of water. It was a great sighting and actually really peaceful to watch, even though the heart rates were bouncing through the roof. Before heading back to camp, we stopped by another watering hole and decided to make a few snacks while we lay underneath a tree and got some shut-eye. The third and final day on the trek, we decided to jump in the vehicles and head out for about 8 hours throughout the park, where we spotted a few cats on the way, and one of my favorite as well being the cheetah. As you can see in front of me here, we have the pair of Barefoot African Rangers that we prepared for the hike. So let's jump into my feedback and see just how this pair of boots performed for me out in the bush. First point to note is that you can already see just how this leather balm has sunk in over the few days out hiking. You can already see glimpses of the original Bronco coloring coming through, along with a slight patina developing on the boots. Although we didn't have too many wet days out in the bush, the beeswax coat definitely did come in handy for the early mornings in the camp when there was a bunch of dew on the grass, keeping the socks dry before we headed off on our hikes. As we got going, I was super happy with my choice of Barefoot African Rangers. Due to there being no steel shank in this boot, we headed over some loose terrain and some unsteady rocks, so having that barefoot feel underfoot definitely did give me that confidence in taking every step over a bit of a dodgy looking rock or over some harsh, unsteady terrain. Another pro to selecting this spec is that it is single lasted. Towards about midday on our hikes, we were experiencing temperatures up to 33 degrees Celsius, so by having that single layer of leather, it allowed the boot to be breathable while we were walking through some hot arid climates here in South Africa. As we saw earlier, at one point we found ourselves trekking through a dry stream bed. On the floor it was all loose coarse sand. I found the Bellowstang spec on this boot to come in most handy here, as there was minimal sand ending up inside my boots after we got through that section of the park. This section of the hike was probably the most challenging for me, as I often had myself thinking if I did have a steel shank in this pair of boots, I would probably be having that more stability as we went through the loose sand on the ground. All in all, I do think the Barefoot African Ranger was the correct choice for the hike, from the Bellowstang stopping the debris getting into the boots, to it being single lasted, and even having the sole being super grippy on the rocks, having a correct feel for what was under my foot as I was going along. Now, if I did have to go back on the hike and take a different boot to test, I would most probably go with the African Ranger, not a barefoot version, but I'll spec in the tire wedge sole that we have in the range. Reason being for that is that I would love to see just how this hike would handle with a steel shank in the boot. Before we sign off, a huge shout out to Hluhluwe-Imfolozi Park. It's always a great experience when we go through there, and as always, I'm looking forward to my next trip. So thank you all for tuning in to another episode. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the channel. All the support is greatly appreciated, and we hope you enjoyed having a closer look into what Hluhluwe-Imfolozi Park has to offer and our Barefoot African Ranger. Cheers.